The pastor came by and brought me a whole list of questions that he wanted us to answer. And basically, what he wants is for us to give a testimony and to make sure we cover all these. So before I start out, I'm going to tell you the first question is, how did you become a Christian, and what was the deciding factor? So, I became a Christian. I had lived with my grandparents and had the 2 little boys and my husband there. And next door to us was a little 10-year-old boy. He was 8 years old, not 10. And he was playing ball hockey against the bottom of the veranda step. The ball, of course, as you know, goes out into the traffic, and the little youngster was killed. And that was quite a tragedy on our street. And I was expecting a baby at the time. Well, a couple of days later was Dwayne's funeral. And I went to the funeral. And in those days, which has nothing to do with the funeral, the insurance man used to come to our house every month. Those of us that are older remember that. We didn't have television, never mind everything else. But the insurance man would come and collect your insurance. So he knew everybody on your street. And he was at the funeral, and I was pregnant. And I all of a sudden got very ill. And this dear man came, and he took me to St. Michael's Hospital. And as it turned out, they did some testing, and they found in the upper intestine a tumor about the size of a grapefruit. And I was pregnant. I don't know which was the worst of the two. They wanted to abort this baby, and Alan and I didn't want them to. And so we asked by then they had me in a bed, and they were going to do it tomorrow. So we asked that they honor that they leave the baby and what have you. Anyway, to make a long story longer, when Alan left the hospital around 8 o'clock that evening, I hadn't been feeling just right, and I didn't want him to worry. So I thought, well, maybe if I get up and just walk along the hall a little bit, this will settle me down and I can go to sleep. And that was the last thing I remember. I woke up the next day. I had no baby. I had no tumor. And apparently, as I was walking down the hall, my appendix had ruptured. And so that's why I was asleep on the hall floor, I guess. However, the baby I like to think it died the way they said. They said it died of shock. I have an idea that it may have also died of peritonitis. I don't know, because I had it. But anyway, to make it shorter if I can, I was there for 2 months and got well enough finally to go home. And what I learned from that the very first night they took me in, or that the young man got me there, they didn't have a bed for me. So after supper, a nurse came along. I'm still on a gurney, and she said, if you don't mind, we don't have any rooms available on the 7th floor. She said, would you mind if we just let you stay with the bed in the closet, and we won't close the door? And I thought, okay. So in and out ones were coming and taking this and taking that. And I began to think, gosh, this might be really, a big deal. And I had been going to a church down in the south end of Toronto, but it was too far away. We didn't have a car, too far away to walk and take the boys to Sunday school. So a neighbor on the new street we were living in said, we have a good Sunday school at our Baptist church at Cosburn and Pape Avenue. And you can walk that far if you want to take the children up. So I did. And then I went upstairs. The children's time was like this, downstairs while we were in. And I heard that pastor, for the first time in my whole life, I heard his sermon, but I also heard that you'd never get to heaven unless you give your life to Christ. And we had come from a United Church, and I'm trying not to knock them, but I never heard that in all the years I was there. And it somehow stuck. So that night in the closet, I asked the nurse, could she get me a Bible, which I knew pretty little about, but she brought me one, and I'm talking to the Lord, and I thought, I don't even know where to look in this, Lord. And I waited, and he didn't give me any real sign, but I opened the Bible up, and it was in Psalms, and it was Psalm 116. And you can read it sometimes. And David was frightened to death because his enemies were after him. And it seems that a lot of times his enemies were after him. But the words that he prayed to God made me realize that, well, if David can pray to God and ask for that kind of help, then I can do it too. And I did, and I told God that I hadn't heard it in the other church, but in this one, the pastor said that you give your life to Christ, and then, he looks after you, and all of the wonderful things he was telling us about it. And so I did that. And I went to sleep that night in the closet, and I was perfectly calm about it, didn't worry about it, slept all night. And when it was time to go for surgery the next morning, before I knew they were coming, and I prayed again. And when they put me on the gurney, I still wasn't afraid, and I thought, this is funny, because I'd had several surgeries before that were never as dire as that one, and was always thinking, oh dear, what can go wrong? But I didn't have that feeling. It was gone. And that's when I realized, only I didn't know what to call it. I said out loud to myself, it took. And like I was getting a dose of medicine, And I thought, this is wonderful. I'm going down the hall, and, the nurses were very nice, and the guys that were pushing me. And I heard one say to the other, I never saw anybody lay so still and not say anything. But I didn't have anything to say except it took. It really worked. So my advice to you about that for how did you become a Christian, don't ask a lot of questions, just do it, and you'll be surprised the Lord will be there to your advantage, whether you even know it. The other part of the question was, what was the deciding factor? Well, of course, the deciding factor was when I woke up and realized that I need the Lord, and I'd better ask him to come into my heart. And it took, so that was the main thing. The second question is, what habits are helpful in your own life to keep you connected to God? And I expect all of us have different things that we do or say. It might be a prayer time. I read my Bible, and I concentrate on a passage, and then I try to figure out how I can apply it to my own life. And this is in the morning. And I thank God for my good night's sleep, and I ask him to give me someone to bless today and someone to help in some way. And he does. He does that in the most unusual ways. About 3 weeks ago, I came into this chapel, and a lady here that I've seen all these years but never really knew very well, when I said good morning, the first thing she said is, I've been praying for you. And that blew me away. I don't know what she knows to pray for me, but she does, and that blessed my heart. And I thought, that's what a church family is about. I can sit here and look at people and say, this one and this one and this one, these two right here, and the lady beside her, I've been moved twice in the last year, and Greg and Barb just come out of nowhere. Don't worry about the move. We'll get you moved. And they did, to Rubidge. And then a year and a bit later, don't worry, we'll get you moved back here to the apartment again. And Charles and Cindy showed up with them. And I have the smoothest moves. When I move, they go like, it's lovely. I don't have to do anything. They chuck me out, then they bring everything, and then, it's just a matter of getting it put away. Again, that's what church families do. I don't have family that live here anymore, so that's where my help has been coming from. And I want especially the new Christians to know that they're not alone. If you're a new Christian and you kind of wonder about things, just trust that God knows who you are and what you need, and he will supply those needs. I find that every single day. Every single day. So that would be one of my things, is to get them to, the new Christians, to make themselves known to someone and find a mentor. That mentor will help you for years and years, and you'll never be, ashamed that you did it or afraid that you did it. I think I answered a couple of questions at the same time. Why do you attend Sunday worship service? Because I'm nosy. I want to know what God is going to bless me with today. I want to know how all of you are and look around and see the kids. And if there's one that's missing, I might be concerned that it's got a cold or whatever. And we have a sense of humor. Did you know that? You'd be surprised. Some people, sometimes when I first came here, looked a little stern. And that was okay. They looked a little stern, but they knew how to smile. You can talk to them, you can have fun with them. So new people, don't let the straight faces bother you. Just go and talk to them and they'll blow your mind. Now, where am I? Who have been positive examples in my Christian walk, and what did you learn from them? Well, part of that I've just answered too. When I was in that little Baptist church that I talked about when the boys were small, there was a family named Moore, the mother and 3 daughters. Now, the daughters were already grown women, and I guess I was about 30, but they kind of took us under their wing. And really, they didn't have any children, these girls, so they treated my children like the aunties that they didn't have. Now, my kids had 2 aunties, but none of them lived in Canada, so it was hard for them to be aunties. But these 3 women, they looked after their dear mother in their home, in their own home, and she lived to be 101, had never been in the hospital, had never had a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, but she couldn't walk. And so for the last 5 minutes, the middle daughter, Lily, she sat up in a chair beside her mother's bed all night, every night, until finally mother went to sleep and didn't wake up. But we had a tragedy in our life about that time, and our youngest daughter was killed in a train accident, and those women were right there. And I remember saying to one of them, I don't know how to pray now. I'm ashamed of myself because I can't talk to God. And one of them said to me, God knows what's happened. He knows how it's affected my husband and I and the other 3 kids. And she said, he knows that you can't pray right now, but Helen, he's got over 80 people right here that pray for you every day. So you don't need to worry. And when he removes the block, then you'll be able to pray again. So you see, new Christians or even old Christians, we need each other. We need each other so badly. So don't ever be afraid to go to anybody in this church. And if they can't help you, they will find someone who can. So remember that. God loves you so much, and he does want the best for you. And especially for young people, if somehow you don't think you're good enough, maybe you committed a sin that to you might seem disastrous, remember that Jesus is there and he's hearing and he already knows and he's forgiving you. And so you need to take time to forgive yourself, to just forgive yourself, and again, talk to someone in your congregation who you know loves you anyway. They're not going to condemn you, and they'll help you through that time. You want to tell me what I'm at now? What piece of advice would you give to new Christians? Oh, I already answered that. What piece of advice would you give to long-time Christians in order to help them remain strong in their faithful journey? And why do you think this advice is important? Well, surprise, surprise, I'm not 30 anymore. I'm going to be 80 in a few months, and I know from experience now how important it is that people take time not only to say good morning to our elderly people in the church or in the building that I live in, but to realize that we can still bless one another. We can do small things. If you know somebody needs help with something, maybe to move something in their apartment, or if they have a walker or a cane, you know that they're going to need help at some point. Keep your eye out for them. Just try to remember that at some point in our lives, all of us will be at that stage. And God will bless you like you wouldn't believe. When I ask God before I go to bed, I thank him for all that he has done today, but I thank him too for what he's going to do in the future. What is he going to do for me today? So my prayer at the end of my morning prayer, and my night one again actually, is, Thou art my God. My times are in your hands. Every hour of every day is yours to control, not mine. Whatever happens through this night, whatever happens tomorrow, I will trust you completely. And you know, I wouldn't give advice to you that I haven't tried myself, but every day I am blessed in sometimes really amazing ways, but always I can sit down at the end of supper and think, gee, this happened today, so-and-so called today. So he'll amaze you at what happens to you every day if you can just put your trust in him. And for the young people that sometimes have problems trusting themselves, just remember, God loves you. He loves you as much as he loves Jesus. He wants the best for you. Never be afraid to go to him. But when you pray, and that's for all of us, look for the answers. Don't just pray and then wander around. Well, I prayed that last month. Keep praying, and every time you pray, look for the answers, and they come. And often they come through the help of your church family. So I pray for each of you, and I thank each of you for the ways in which you've helped me. And surprise, surprise, you'll probably have to help me again at some point. I won't move. The next one will be in the box. I won't. But I do thank you for your time. God bless.